Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Rest is Lean podcast. Thanks for joining us again. Joined as always by my rambling buddies, Russell and Alan, and they're down there in those two corners. And loosely, we would associate ourselves with the title of Lean Professionals. If you've got any questions for us, if you've got any comments, please drop them in the comments area below this video if you're viewing and listening on YouTube, or you can please send emails to Russell. Where should they send emails to?
Why haven't they taken this down off of all streaming channels at gmail.com?
Yeah, that's an option. Alan, if they prefer to get a reply, where should they send their questions?
They definitely will. They may get a reply from the one Russell just said. I'm not too sure what one it'll be. But if they want a proper response, it's therestislean@gmail.com.
Fantastic.
Fine, we had some good questions last week at Subcon, didn't we?
Yes, we did.
We did indeed.
Met some really nice people, and yeah.
Like, where are the toilets? Where's the exit?
These passes aren't real.
Are you Rupert Grint?
Story for another time.
Definitely.
Who will play us when we're famous? Right. So what I've been up to in the last couple of weeks is mainly home stuff, fun stuff, doing a little bit more with regular companies. Let's call it 5S, but it's more like FOD world at the moment. Russell, what have you been up to, pal?
So, the usual in and out of companies, bit of speaking, but I'd like to take my 30 seconds here to raise some good news and bad news.
Good news.
The good news is very good. It looks like Jamie George might, in fact, get a late call-up for the British and Irish Lions, which I'm sure we're all relieved about. The bad news is they've delayed the industrial strategy again. It was supposed to be announced this week.
The way your brain works
by the government. But they've delayed it until the 29th of June. They're still chirping. They're still scuffling around in Treasury.
Yeah.
If anybody non-manufacturing in government ever listens to this, we contribute a huge amount to the economy, Look after us.
True.
Yeah.
It is a bit.
I think they're more scrambling out where the money's going to come from.
Yeah, of course they are. Yeah.
Right. So,
anyway. Al, what have you been up to, pal?
Well, obviously recovering from our fantastic 2 days over at Subcon, which is which I thoroughly enjoyed. Dipping in and out of a few existing clients, in particular one with my printing company down in Bedford, just checking in on them to see how things have progressed. We've been doing some working with them on and off over the past 18 months to 2 years. So it was a nice, it was a welcome invite to see how things have been progressing. They wanted to show off to me rather than the other way around.
Nice.
So, so that was nice. And it was an interesting conversation that I had with their FD, which I'll come to in a second. And then I'm here in one of my other clients at the moment. They've kindly released me away for a couple of hours and given me a room. However, I've just said to John a moment ago, I might get kicked out shortly. So I'm hoping they'll keep me in here for the duration of the podcast. We'll wait and see.
Him out, but he's locked himself in the room.
I really am a client. I've not just walked into some random company unannounced. But anyway,
hang on. So your client is paying you to talk shite with us?
Absolutely.
Was that in the original proposal, Al?
That was in the original proposal. Yeah, obviously. Yeah, goes with the territory. No, what it actually means is for the two and a bit hours. Obviously, you were late this morning, John. So I've had to, that's overtime for me tonight, which I've got to stay back and do some extras for. So just for the record, they will be getting their full day rate off me today.
Fabulous.
Yeah, good to know. And it's not in Harvester vouchers. Before you mention that as well, Ross. If I can, a bit of a shout out for this the graphics and printing company that I've been working with over in Bedford Way. So they're called CGI.
Yeah.
And the MD is a guy called Peter Owen. Fantastic guy. I've known Peter now for the best part of nearly 20 years, from our IF days, actually, when we first met. Yeah. We mentioned on a previous episode the supply chain program that I did with Granger with the caravans. So they were a tier one supplier into the caravan OEM, a motorhome OEM. And so we've been doing some work with them on and off for about 2 years. So they came down, and we were having a conversation with the FD, and we got onto the topic of measures and metrics. When we talk about when we have conversations around measures, a lot of them tend to be cost related, as opposed to what I would prefer is value related. Because one thing I've always been quite passionate about over the past 10, 20 years is I'm a really keen believer of measures drive the right behaviours. I don't know if you guys remember when we were at IF, Mr. Broom used to always say, what gets measured gets done.
Yeah.
There's other variations of a theme in terms of that. Okay. And it's always something that stuck in my mind. And we also used to have our classic 7 measures, didn't we?
Yeah.
All right.
Yes.
And it got me thinking about when we talk about cost, we talk about it generally is about a piece of equipment. So OEE, for example.
Yeah.
All right. Or it's targeted at people.
Yeah.
Yeah. So people productivity used to be one of our 7 measures, didn't it? If you remember.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. And I think we had value added per person. All right. Which for me was a better one, in my humble opinion. Okay. And I just wanted to get your thoughts in terms of since the days since you left IF and gone it alone. Have you continued with the 7 measures as a classic format? Have you trifled with other measures? Have you got any additional thoughts in terms of cost against value? Because for me, it's a really big thing that we have. I think it's really, really important to set your stall out at an early day, and we spoke about this briefly at Subcon. I'm a great believer that we should use the word value a lot more than we do cost when we're talking about lean, continuous improvement, operational excellence. And I think part of it is because when we go into a lot of our organizations, the financials tend to be more cost related because by definition, it's traditional cost accounting methods that the finance teams are used to.
Yeah. It's kind of the clues in the title, isn't it? The
exactly right.
We're going to go down that route, and an awful lot of businesses are scored internally and externally on the pound note. So I think that's kind of inevitable.
Exactly. So I just wanted to get your views in terms of through your careers. What have you changed it? Have you gone down the classic 7 measures? Have you got any other ones?
I think I will typically deploy the idea of the 7 measures during introductions to lean, getting people used to the idea of we're trying to improve. You don't want to improve just, and in lean circles, people might do the same thing and gravitate to pace. And again, I'm using that word to be vague, but speed, performance, productivity, but let's say pace. But I'll probably deploy the 7 measures as a way of looking at a suite, a balanced checkbook of measures that you might need around your business. But I am no longer wedded to them in the same way as I was when we were originally taught. And one of the reasons for that is since working on myself, I've worked with a lot of world-class procurement lean specialists. And, we don't speak a different language. It is not a completely different skill set. It's the experience and the context that they have is different. And we're working with them guys. This idea, as you've described, Al, value versus cost is very, very strong in their parlance. So people choose a new supplier or a new component to procure, and you could choose it on cost, but you would be possibly caught out as a fool.
Disappointed.
Very, very disappointed because the overall value that new supplier may bring or that part may bring may be lower, as well as their costs. So this concept of cost versus value, they're not the same, came very strong from them. And measures like uptime per pound, came out as, whoa, that's really changed my thinking. So if you're purchasing a machine or a complete suite of machines to make a process, something quite substantial, one of the things I was showing was you want to value its the expense of it in uptime per pound. So don't consider how much it's going to cost you as strongly as if I pay £1,000 to supplier A, I will get 7 months of uptime during the year. If
Okay.
I pay less to the next supplier, I may get a different level, higher or lower, of uptime in a year. And that might be about reliability, might be availability, it might be it's a great bit of kit and it never breaks down, but it's got to be serviced every 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And it's out of commission and that it starts to open your eyes. So I think they're separate, and
So,
I
so
try more measures.
in that case, John, are they in that specific? Because there's a my answer will be around case by case, but in that specific case, uptime per pound. That's what you said, wasn't it? Uptime per
Yeah.
Are they prioritizing availability on the assumption that that quality they can handle and take care of, and productivity against commission cycle time? They've got that nailed down as well. Was that a particular
Yeah,
weakness for them in the past?
it was very much on the basis that you've the barrier to entry to get into their bidding systems, etc., involves being accredited, having capability, etc. And again, we shouldn't think of the lean world as silos, but maybe the logos or brand names of the products that these guys are considering get pre-filtered by engineering,
Yeah.
or I don't know, maintenance teams who go over and somebody has checked that this machine is capable, or this process is capable of producing the product to the right standard. Hence, procurement may be a less focused on that quality angle, but that's a weakness in itself.
Yeah. It's interesting, John. I'll think about that one. My answer to the question, Al, and I'll answer it, and then I'll go off beam again, and I'll come back
It's inevitable.
as ever. So it's business as usual.
Yeah.
My answer is yes. I've always given it the 7 measures their due respect, because I remember the parentage of them. The SMT went out and asked the automotive trade, how do you measure your businesses? And they started off with a couple of hundred or maybe 150, and they whittled it down to the 7. And in that whittling, if you stand back and look at them, they are a really nice rounded bunch for the technical aspects of running a shop floor and associated, like floor space utilization, an example of the old stock shops. I still use it now. Imagine you're a pigeon flying above your factory and look at where there's stock in the factory and look at where there's actually something making something. And that ratio should scare you. And if it doesn't scare you, you're not paying attention. So I've always respected the 7 measures. And as with everybody, I was wedded to them for a couple of years, but now I'm very flexible. It's case by case. This whole conversation has taken me back to one of my previous employers, a multinational business who I think were guilty. Listen, I've never run a multinational business, so but they were guilty of several crimes here on the cost versus value and metrics front. One of them was that when I helped them sort out their production system, they had 33 separate measures of quality.
Wow.
Madness. So there is something in metrics about just make it a few. And there's a lot of sense. I mentioned before, have a look at Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger's paired metrics, the principal agent problem, and pairing metrics to avoid them being gamified. Have a look at it. It's really good. So there are 33 measures. Also, John, to your point, they would euphemistically push the purchasing people to source on best cost. What they meant was lowest cost.
Yes.
Because they didn't recognize the management time and the golden sample problem. The management time involved in sorting out a supply chain, 6,000 miles away, opening a crate with a bag of crabs in and
Yeah.
realizing that they've got to wait another 6 weeks for something that will work.
Yeah. Yeah.
The most heinous one they had was that whenever somebody wanted to recruit somebody into that £1 billion business, they filled in a form,
Mm.
and that form was called a cost walk-in.
Yeah.
And the rationale was cost walks in on two legs.
Mm.
Now, the intention was, quite understandably, let's hire at the right rate.
Mhm.
The subliminal message that sends, I think, is people are purely and solely cost centers. They are not an asset to be invested in that can return for you every day. It's
Yeah.
Exactly.
interesting, the language we use
Yeah.
gets people thinking a certain way.
Yeah.
It's a be cheap message,
Yeah.
which unfortunately means you might end up with cheap. And I don't necessarily mean cost. You are going to end up with cheap people, cheap materials, cheap machines in the widest possible sense.
Which affects the markets in which you can sell your product for the margin that you can sell them.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is why I was saying before, in terms of, I'm a great believer with our measures will need to drive the right behaviors.
Yeah.
So taking your example, John, if you look at the supplier, if you go purely on cost,
Mm.
price per component, for example,
Yeah.
all right, cost per component, that might be fantastic. But if they never delivered on time and you spend an absolute fortune on air freighting, okay, they're paying for it, but
Yeah.
the disruption that it costs you as a business to be able to sell your products,
Yeah.
which is what it's fundamentally about.
Yeah.
All right. Pales into significance. So, we always had QCD. I know we talk about SQCDP nowadays, but QCD, it needs to be at least a balance of the three, of which, okay, cost you have got to bear in mind, but they've got to be able to deliver on time.
Mm.
Okay. And the quality and the stuff that they're delivering has to be right for us to use.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I just think it's very, very dangerous that we pick on one. And I think the key word or words that you use, John, in your example was world class
Yeah.
companies, because they look at the range. They don't just look at one particular. They don't just look at the sea. But I have to say, I'm still in businesses nowadays, which you would, some very large companies, and I only had this conversation probably 3 months ago on a forum,
Mm.
and the procurement director said, "It doesn't matter what I do, I'll be browbeaten unless I go because I'll have to go on cost."
Yeah. Yeah. I
So
mean,
that is still very much alive today, which is such a shame, isn't it?
Well, but it's bound to be Al, because we have to be fair here, because so all three of us are husbands, yeah.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Now I've not interviewed your wives, but I have mine. Um, and she reports back that
I'm
I'm not the
scared
perfect husband.
now. When's my wife's interview and gonna prep her? What's going on? I don't know.
Nope, there's no priming the witness here, John. So the bad news is, yeah, I'm not a perfect husband, and neither are you two. Our customers, our wives, have made a choice, and they have on the SQDCP, whatever the equivalent of that is for a marriage, they sacrifice something. So I guess the question is, what should a manufacturing business purchasing in a supply chain? And bear in mind, 90% plus are SMEs.
Hmm.
What should they give, or how should they decide what to give? Because perfect suppliers are few and far between.
I think it's a brilliant question. I think it's a brilliant analogy, but I can't help thinking, Albert, what he said is, in our case, our wives have obviously balanced all the available suppliers of whatever they need.
Hmm.
No,
And,
quality, John. Your wife has sacrificed quality.
but out there was quality to look at, delivery, cost, all that sort of good stuff, safety even. But what they've got for is local availability.
The localization strategy.
To be honest with you, but if you think about it, they have looked at all three and taken what's
Oh,
the best balance of the three, haven't they? The bit I was trying to get to is you mentioned, Russ, earlier on about the seven measures, okay? And one, you also, John, you mentioned about a piece of equipment.
Yeah.
All right. One that we invariably used out of the 7 was OEE. Okay. But the consistent drive to, I don't know if you remember this, and I may be wrong. Was it Mick Sannon, the guys used to say, well, world class was 85% OEE or
that's
above?
right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
So you
Ginger
had to hit 97 point some % on each one,
Yeah.
okay,
no,
to get anywhere near 85. Was it?
it's actually 90, 99, and 95 is the, but it's horseshit, Al, because it depends
Yeah,
how
exactly.
complicated your process is.
Exactly right, exactly right. But there was that analogy, and everyone, do you remember in the late 90s, early 90s, everyone who's got on the bandwagon. OEE is the measure to, is the measure to have. Okay, but ultimately it drives the wrong behaviour, because if you're just, all you're basically doing is saying, right, well, we want to churn out as much bloody work as we can out of this piece of kit, right? Irrespective whether the next process needs the bits or not.
Yeah.
Because all it actually does, if it's dangerous, is it just drives a shed load of inventory that we can't get rid of.
Yeah. I think the two most dangerous measures that I see in businesses, and this doesn't mean they're not useful, it just means they're dangerous.
Yeah.
I know quite a few businesses that when you first approach them and get involved, their main driver for their management and production teams is either inventory, the value of inventory.
Absolutely.
Because corporately, we like, that's literally the worth of that part of the business, which is great for the stock market and whatever. But it assumes all that inventory is flying out the door. You could have built a warehouse and filled it full of comedy.
Absolutely.
Who knows? Inventory, which also stops you getting rid of rubbish. But even more worrisome is the number of businesses which take the idea of measuring the number of machining hours. So, productive hours we've churned out this week or this month or this year. And that's a useful thing. But on its own, it drives people to do things like run one of the processes dead hard when they're struggling to get the machined hours or productive hours up.
It drives the very waste that we try to eliminate
out the tail end of the process.
And to cherry pick what to make shift to shift.
Yes,
absolutely.
Make washers. Do we need washers? No, but we can't get some hours in on it.
But John, it takes us back. I'm sorry to keep banging this drum, but it takes us back to pair metrics and making sure that you are really thinking about your metrics and pairing them up. So SQDCP, I'm working with a company now, and I've asked them to come up. I asked for their opinion, and we've come up with one metric for each of SQDCP for their SQDCP board in a 1, 3, 10 style, 1 second, 3 second, 10-second board. And I've done that knowing that they'll come up with them, they'll start to use them, and then they'll gamify them. So I'm thinking, what's the pair metric that stops that?
Yes, absolutely. I said I'm less wedded to the 7 measures than I ever was. I still think, like you guys, they're great. They're great.
They are great because they looked at all the inputs, didn't they? They gave you to think about
the
all
history
the
behind it is great, and you can probably use those same inputs to create most of the other measures we may want to dream up anyway. So I still reference them, but I'm not wedded to them. The two things that I am wedded to is you should have some sort of suite of measures. Don't measure one thing.
Absolutely.
And I will typically deploy the idea of SQCDP. So that's pretty much a universal. And sometimes we don't end up with those things, but that's a constant message from me. And for anybody who's not in this world, obviously, we mean safety, quality, delivery, cost, people, typically. I'll always deploy that as a message, and I'll always deploy the idea of the balanced scorecard. I don't really like that expression, but what I do like is the idea of you should have 3 types of measure that you are going after. One is the target, which is probably linked to your strategy, and it's a big picture thing, and it might be as broad as turnover or profit, and that's fine. Have it. That's great. But if you're trying to measure that come back to it once a quarter, once a year. That's great. You need something at process level that you can measure today, tomorrow, or maybe even after lunch to see if you're moving in the right direction, and something that people can affect and actually understand how they affect it. So that might be the number of rivets installed per day, per hour, per shift. And you've probably got variations on that depending on where in the process you deploy it. So have the big target, have the process measure, but then insert the balancing measure. And Russell definitely alluded to this in his little conversation with us. The balancing measure, or I like to put it, the measures of unintended consequence.
Yes.
So are we on target to hit this big measure, which is profit? Yay. Are we putting in more rivets every single day than we did the day before? Yes. What balancing measures we got on there? Because it sounds like this John D's doing an amazing job on the shop floor. Oh, staff turnover. We put that one in. That doesn't sound very related. No. How's that going then? Yeah, they're all leaving.
Yeah.
Oh, one of the other measures we put in there was number of fingers. But turns out those two measures you can just leave as one. What's going on then? Oh, well, since he got down there with the megaphone and he's crammed them all into one corner and nobody's allowed to go to the loo no more. Yeah, they're not as happy as they used to be. And they're cutting corners to hit the measures and the measure of unintended consequence.
Unintended consequences, John, is brilliant. A story that stuck with me that I was told years ago was about an NGO overseas somewhere in the Far East some years ago. And they were trying to encourage, to save local crops, they were trying to encourage people to catch rats, and they were offering money for each rat tail that people
yeah, there you go with this.
presented.
Beautiful.
And so people started presenting whole handfuls and basketfuls of rat tails. And so, according to the NGO, things are going well because we're getting lots. What they didn't realize is that people have started breeding rats.
Rats, exactly. Yeah.
So I sometimes think an unrelated example can help bring an example to life. But
that is a perfect analogy for what we're talking about. I remember being in a famous factory that makes things that fly that had a stage payments system. At the end of every quarter, I think, somebody would turn up from a ministry and walk down with clipboard and look for products on the shop floor that had reached a certain stage, which was the gearbox and engine has been installed in the airframe.
Yeah.
Being loose here, you've probably cracked my code. And he'd walk down the shop floor and go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and essentially number multiplied by gazillions.
Yeah.
Send them money.
Yeah.
And as soon as that guy had walked out the door, they would remove engines and gearboxes because they weren't ready to be put in yet. You can't fit things.
Yeah.
But we did what we needed to get the money in. Now, was that a good, clever idea? No. Because what are you doing now? Spending time, money, effort, undoing the artificial thing you did to achieve the measure. And
Correct.
You did exactly the same at the end of the next month as well.
John, that's a hockey stick.
Rat tails.
That still happens today.
Yes. That's a subject for perhaps
another day.
Another podcast.
Because we drive so much in terms of the cost element as opposed to the value element, and many of the cost measures are generally have to do with people in it. We're focused on either if we make more with the same people, that's great. But if all that does is cause unnecessary inventory in the workplace, then it's irrelevant.
Yeah.
So going back to your top level measure,
you
can't get it out the door. All right. So what then invariably happens, we tend to focus on the people element, and then people have this perception, rightly or wrongly, that they link what we do with the reduction of headcount.
Yeah.
Okay. And I think that's what drives a bad rap.
Yeah.
Okay. I think from a equipment perspective, we mentioned OEE earlier, it drives people. People have this mentality to think it drives us to be flat out as much as possible. It's this amazing 85% OEE. Quality, again, no problem. We want to make sure everything we're making is right. Okay. All right. But all I would argue, everyone focuses on that OEE, but all it's actually driving, if you're not careful, again, is more inventory in the workplace that goes nowhere.
Yeah.
Right. But for the reason we've got to do it is we're saying we've got to flog this asset. We've got to sweat this asset out because there's this perception, there's a cost. The unit cost of the parts we're making will become more expensive if we don't sweat this asset out. And it's a complete misnomer. It really is. Yeah. And yet there are some great companies out there today, or well-renowned companies, shall we say, who unfortunately still have this mentality. Actually, there's still plenty of opportunity for us to pass and teach people the actual right message about what lean's all about. But fundamentally, it comes full circle to my conversation with the FD because they're cost trained. Yeah. They're not value trained.
Right. So are we ready to wrap up, gents, with Japanese word of the week?
Let's go for it.
So looking forward to it.
I'm cheating today because Japanese word of the week is 3 words, and it's inspired actually by the mentions of inventory and the perils of inventory that we've had a couple of times this episode. The 3 words are muda, mura, and muri. Now, muda is one a few of you all know. It's essentially the Japanese word for waste, as in the 7 wastes. So I'm not going to plough that furrow too far. 7 wastes, or 8 wastes, as some like to say, is also the 7 mudas. The interesting ones are muri and mura, because if you just concentrate on waste, you're looking at 1/3 of the potential to improve your business. Muri is essentially overburden, and mura is unlevelness, unevenness. So muri, think of things like you've got a key person who you're overloading. There's a human bottleneck in your process, perhaps a design engineer who you are overburdened, or an assembly operator online who you're giving too much work, or maybe a machine you're asking to do things it's not capable of. It could even be a maintenance fitter apprentice who you're sending to fix the most complicated machine, and they don't know how to do it, and you're going to break that person and the machine. Those are just examples. Mura, unevenness, is things like your customer order book is coming in like that. It's up and down, and you have to find a way to level that demand. Or it can be things like, again, you've got a purchase order clerk who the stage ahead batches up their POs, their requisition forms, and gives them 50 at a time. So you're putting batches through the business, which takes us to demand amplification and bullwhip. So the 3 M's. Please don't just look at the 7 wastes, the 7 mudas. Look at the other 2 as well.
Thank you very much. So that one wraps up another podcast. Hopefully,
that was quick.
I know. Time flies when you're having fun. And what we will do is invite you guys who are listening to please subscribe to our podcast. Please send us your comments and questions because we absolutely love them, and we make an attempt to get back in touch with people every single time, even if it doesn't pop up on the podcast itself, but often we hope to do that in the future. So leave us a comment below or drop us an email to, and we'll go for Alan to save money.
therestislean@gmail.com.
That's not the one I've got written down.
I know.
I've used to got the one.
God.
Righto. So see you again next time on The Rest Is Lean. See you, folks.
Cheers, everyone. Take care.